We begin the Gemara today on Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis, 5 lines from the bottom. Tana Rabbana we learned in Abraisa Hanoitul Yodov. A person washes his hands to eat. Niskaven he had a kavana that he's washing his hands, not just stamazay, his hands were in water, but he had kavana that he wants to be metayed his hands. Then Yodov Tahiris, his hands become pure and he's able to eat. Lo niskaven, he did not have kavana, so then Yodov Tmeis, then his hands remain tummy. Fragt the Gemara, but Vatanya, in a Braisa we learned, Bein Niskaven, Bein Lo Niskaven, whether he has kavana. What? I skipped something? Oh, sorry, okay, skipped a line and a half. V'chein hamatbil yadav, similar in those cases where you're supposed to toivel your hands into the water. If you remember, we had in the Mishnah, b'negeh to kachim. When you're eating kachim, it's not enough to wash your hands with a keli, the way we wash today in al natilas yadayim, but you have to toivel your hands in a kosher mikveh. So if niskaven yadav tahiris, lo niskaven yadav tmeis. You had kavana, so your hands are pure. You did not have kavana, your hands are tameh. But Vatanya, we learned in Abraisa, Bein Niskaven, Bein Lo Niskaven, whether you had kavana, whether you did not have kavana, Yadav Tahiris, the hands are tired. So how could the Abraisa say that there's a distinction? Rav Nachman, so Rav Nachman answers, Lo Kashya, there's no question here. Kan L'chulin, where we're speaking about chulin, you wash your hands, whether you had kavana or not, your hands will become tired. And Kan L'maiser, when we're speaking about maiser, or as Rashi says, maiser, and for sure truma, and anything higher than that, if you wash your hands or you toivel your hands without kavana, it won't become tar. So how do I know the chulin loy boy kavana? That for chulin, when you toivel or when you wash your hands, you don't need kavana. It's not, because there's a Mishnah that says, a Mishnah mikvois, it says as follows: Gal shenitlash. You have this huge wave that is coming from the ocean and got picked up in the air, separated from the ocean. Ubayar Baim saw, and it has enough of the minimum size of a mikveh, 40 saw. V'nafal al adam, and it came flying down onto a person, or vala kalim, or on kalim. Tahirim, so they become tired by this big gal, this big wave of water that came upon them. Now, so what do we see from this? Katani adam dumya de kalim. So the Mishnah here is saying that whether the person it came crashing down on a person or it came down on kalim and it was immersed in this water, that we compare them. So what do we understand from this? Ma kalim, just like the kalim, the vessels that were there, that the water came crashing down on them, dulay mechavni. There was no kavana that this wave of water should be purified with this immersion in this wave of water. Afadam, the same with the person that was standing there and now got immersed in this wave of water. Delay mechaven, even without kavana, he'll become tar. That's what we see from here. That you don't need any kavana in the tefillah of a mikveh if it's for matters of chulin. There's a big discussion in Rishayim when you get to this wave of water, because usually the halacha is when you have a mikveh, it has to be in one place. It can't be flowing. What's called zeichelin, as we'll see soon from the Rashi and the explanation of the continuation of the Gemara. If there's water that's flowing, or even if you have a mikveh and the mikveh is not properly insulated, the walls it's flowing out, and the water keeps on going down, it's not a kosher mikveh. It has to be a shbeirin in one place. So the question is, what's the story with this wave of water? So the Rishonim say that this concept of the water that has to be in one place does not apply to a mayon, to a spring of water, and this yam that we're speaking about here has the halacha of a mayon, and therefore even when the wave lifts up in the air and crashes down on the person, it doesn't matter. There's no issue of it being zeichlin, of it flowing and moving out of its place, and it'll be matayr the person. But the which concept?
Of kavanah. I mean, what's the difference?
What do you mean?
What's the difference if you had kavanah? The pool that happened.
No, that doesn't matter. So, but that was the whole chiddush of what the Mishnah said.
Yeah,
that you do have to have Chazal. This is all takanas of Chazal. Chazal wa misakin, that for anything other than chulin, if you don't have kavana, the tefillah of the mikveh doesn't count. It's all midrabana. Chazal wa misakin this, right? But not for chulin though. That's the chiddush of our Gemara. For chulin, as long as you're immersed in the mikveh, you're tar. But for anything above chulin, meiser, if you don't have kavana, it's as if you did not immerse in the mikveh. So here the Gemara is bringing the source for this. That we see a person is similar to kalim and he becomes tar.
Why do you need a wave?
What again?
Why do you need a wave?
You don't need a wave, but this is just a scenario that happened, yeah. So this is seemingly the chiddush of that Mishnah there, that even without kavana, you would become tired. But the Gemara immediately refutes this and says, Umimai, how do you know that that's the point of that Mishnah? Dilme, perhaps, maybe the person sees that it's a stormy day and these waves are coming off the shore. And he's standing there, instead of going to a mikveh, he's waiting and he's having kavanah that this wave should come over him and cover him. Askinon, maybe that's what we're speaking about. And therefore saying the reverse, V'kelim dumye the adam, the kelim that were immersed in this water of the wave, similar to the person himself. Ma adam, the bar kavana, just like the person himself, he has kavana that this wave should come over him and be immersed in it, and there will be a mikveh for him. Af kelim the mechavan lahu, so to the kelim, it's his kelim. Of course, the kelim themselves can't have kavana, but the person had kavana. He placed his kelim there intentionally that the wave should cover it. So now the Gemara asks, V'chi teime, if you'll argue and say, if the person sees the wave coming and he's sitting there and waiting for the wave to cover him, so then maila memra. What's the chiddush that this wave of water will be metayre? Why not? He's there, he's waiting, he has kavana, the wave has 40 saw. What's missing? Says the Gemara, the chiddush would be as follows. Because I would think to say, ligzayr, if you allow a person to taivel in this wave from the water of an ocean, even though this itself is fine, but maybe there would be a gzeira to say that now dilma asi lemitbal b'chardelis shulkshamim. If you allow a person to taivel here, a person might also end up taiveling in a flow of rainwater that's flowing down a mountain. And a person will say, look, if I was allowed to taivel in a wave of the ocean that came out of the water, so I can also taivel with rainwater that's flowing down from a mountain. And that's not allowed. As Rashi here brings, when you have when you have the rainwater coming down a mountain, that's not a kosher mikveh. For two reasons, Rashi says. Either Rashi says it's called a katafris, when you have a very steep slope and there's water flowing down. So even if you have water, they have a lot of water, enough that a person could immerse in it, but it's not considered that you have the 40 saw of water in one place. It has to be a flat surface where the water is, or at least not so steep. But if it's a katafris, extremely steep, and it's going down a slope, that's not a mikveh b'chlal. You don't have the water in one place. Besides that, Rashi says, regarding mei gishamim, regarding rainwater, as I mentioned before, there's the issue of zeichelin. Zeichelin means the water is flowing, it's not in one place. By the water coming from the ocean, there's no issue of the water being in a wave and flowing. But by the rainwater, there is. So we should maybe make a gzeira and say that if you allow a person to taivel in the wave from the ocean, he may come and make a comparison and do the same with rainwater. Or the Gemara says that there's actually a gzeira to be geyser regarding this wave itself. Nigzair roshin otu kipin. We should make a gzeira the lower tips of this wave because of the higher center of the wave. What's usually the shape of a wave of water that comes out of the water? You have this huge wave that comes out, and it's almost like this big arch of water that comes out. And you have the lower tips that comes down and crashes down on the person. But then you have the arch, the center of the arch of this wave in the middle that still remains in midair before it crashes down on the person. So what the Gemara is saying is, you have the person that's sitting on the ground, or he has his kalim that are on the ground, and the water comes down on the ground onto the person or onto the kalim. That's fine. That will be matayr the person. But you should be geyser that the person, when he sees this wave of water, he might take kalim and throw it up into the air, and it's going to be immersed in that arch of the wave there in midair, before the water crashes down onto the ground. And that's not a good mikveh. As the Gemara will now explain that that's not going to be matayr in the midair. So maybe we should be geyser that a person might do such a thing. Kamash malan, the loy gazrinon. And that's the chiddush of that Mishnah, that we don't make this gzeira. So the point the Gemara is saying is, who says the chiddush of that Mishnah is that a mikveh is metayir without kavana? Maybe the chiddush is that it's metayir even though there would be various reasons to make a gzeira. So now the Gemara explains this last point here. From where do we know the loy matbilim bekipin, that you can't be taivel in the high point of the wave that's in midair? The Tanya, because we learned in the Braisa, matbilin beroshin, you can be taivel in the lower tips of this wave that comes down onto the ground, but ve'em matbilin bekipin, you can't taivel in the center and the height of this wave that's in midair. Why not? Lefi she'ein matbilin ba'aver. There's no tefillah in a mikveh in air. Rashi here says, the Torah says mikveh means a pool of water that's on the ground. And even this wave that's considered to be that it's coming from a spring of water and it's not rainwater, but still a mikveh has to be on the ground, not in the midair. So therefore, there's no such a thing of mikveh and ba'aver. Point is that now we don't yet have a source for this chiddush that for chulin you don't need kavanah. So where is the source for this? Elo, so rather, mehadet nan, the source is from the following Mishnah. Mishnah says, Peiros shenaflu toich hamasa mayim. What happens if a person had fruits that fell into a stream of water? Upashat mi sheyadav tmeyes, and a person that his hands are tameh, stuck his hands into the water, vinotlan, to take the fruits. He wanted to get his fruits that are going down the stream of water. So what's the halacha? Yadav tahiris. So just by sticking his hands into the water, even though, why did he stick his hands into the water? Not because he was trying to wash to be able to eat or to be metayed his hands. He stuck his hands in there to get his fruits. So his hands will be tied. So here you see clearly his hands become tied even without kavanah. Upeiros, now the peiros that fell into this water, einon b'chi yutan. They will not become susceptible to tumah based on the halacha of ki yutan. What's this halacha of ki yutan? Anytime any produce would become wet, that's what makes it susceptible to tumah. If the produce is not wet and it touches tumah, it does not become tumah. It has to be wet to become susceptible to tumah. Now the halacha of kiyutan is that we darshan, even though in the Torah, the lashon of the Torah is kiyutan mayim al zera. If there's any water or any fluid that comes onto this peiri, but Rashi says we darshan as if it says kiyitain, not yutan. Yutan means it happens automatically. Yitain means you put water on it. What does this mean? Only if it got wet willingly, that you are interested in these peiros becoming wet, then it becomes susceptible to tumah. But if you weren't interested in it becoming wet, it does not become susceptible to tumah. So over here, the person was not interested in his peiros becoming wet, and he didn't want his hands to get wet either. It fell into the water. So therefore, the peiros that fell into the water against his will not become susceptible to tumah.
When it rains, the same thing.
True, and a chanami could be. V'im.
But we say that
what?
When it rains, it does become.
No, who's holding you that?
After the
depends. If the person left it there, it depends on different conditions, not always. If a person is sticking his hands into the water in order to wash off his hands, so then yadav tahiris, as far as your hands are concerned, it'll be the same halacha. Your hands become tahir. Again, the same point as before. If you stick your hands into the water, it doesn't matter. Either way, your hands became immersed in the water. It's tahir. But now v'hapeiros harehein b'chi yutan. Now the peiros, you're happy now that the peiros fell into the water. Even though maybe Rashi here says, even maybe originally you didn't want your peiros to fall into the stream of water. It's going to flow away. But now, because these peiros fell into the water, you got an opportunity to wash your hands. So after the fact, you're happy that the peiros got wet into the water, and therefore the peiros becomes susceptible to tumah by being wet in the water here. Okay, but the main reason the Gemara brought this Mishnah, it's a Mishnah in Machshirin. We see here that you put your hands into the water, even if it was not for the purpose to be mitar your hands, without kavanah, your hands are become tired. Rabbi asked on Rav Nachman that said this chiddush. What did it say in our Mishnah? A person toivels for chulin, v'huchsak l'chulin, and he had kavanah that his tefillah should be for eating chulin, asr l'maiser. You're not allowed to, your tefillah does not work, the kavanah for the tefillah for chulin does not work for maiser. So what does this mean? Huchsakin, it sounds like even regarding chulin, only if you had kavanah, it works for the chulin, but lo yuchsak lo. If you did not have kavanah, then even for the chulin, you're not going to be tar for chulin either. So you see that even for chulin you need kavanah. Answers the Gemara, no. Hachikama, this is how you read the Mishnah. Afal pi shehuchsak l'chulin, aser l'maiser. Even if you're going to be, the tefillah is going to be good for chulin, but it's still aser for maiser. Not that you need that kavanah for chulin. You don't need a kavanah. But since when you toivled, you only had kavanah for the chulin, so therefore it's not going to work for maiser, which needs specifically kavanah that you're toivling for maiser. But you don't need a kavanah for the chulin. Eisvei, another question he asked him, Taval v'loy huchsak. It said in the Mishnah that a person that was toivel, and v'loy huchsak, he did not have any kavanah. So Rashi explained in the Mishnah, it means a person was just bathing in the water, and he did not have any kavanah for any tefillah whatsoever. Ki'ilu loy taval. It's as if he didn't toivel at all. My love, don't you think this means ki'ilu loy taval klal? This means it's as if the person didn't toivel at all. That's a simple reading of the Mishnah. So the Gemara answers, loy, that's not what it means. Ki'ilu loy taval l'maiser. All the Mishnah is saying is that it's not going to be a good tefillah for maiser, but for chulin, it will be a good tefillah. Aval tava l'chulin hu. But it is a good tefillah for the chulin. It's not, again, aval tava l'chulin. It is a good tefillah for the chulin. Now, hu savar dachi kamatchile. Now, he thought, which is Rav Nachman, the rabbi was asking him this question, he thought that he's pushing him off. This is a deichik in the Mishnah. I mean, the simple pshat in the Mishnah is that if you tava v'loi hochsak ki'il loi tava. It didn't say the Mishnah only for meiser. It's mashma in the Mishnah that the tefillah doesn't work at all. And he's being deiche. He's telling him, no, it only meant for meiser. So he thought he was just pushing off his question, but it's really not a good answer. But nafak, dok, va'ashkach. He went out and he was medayik. He looked and he found that there's a clear braisa that says this. The Tanya, the Braisa says, Toval v'loi huchzak, a person tavels and he did not have kavanah for tefillah, he was just bathing in the water. Asr l'maiser, you're asr to eat maiser, but a mutter l'chulin. You're allowed to eat chulin. So this is a clear Braisa, like the Chiddush of Rav Nachman. When it comes to chulin, there's no need for kavanah. Not when you wash your hands for netilas yadayim, and not when you tavel in the mikveh. I remember there's a letter from the Rebbe about this, a very interesting letter. When you get to this, that the women that don't keep taras hamishpacha and they don't go to the mikveh and so on, but the fact that they go to the beaches and they're in the water, which is a kosher to mikveh, even without kavanah, it could save them from, it could be retire them. Remember, you remember such a thing? The Rebbe writes such a thing. I remember the Rebbe writes this in a letter also, based on this inyan that they don't need any kavanah, even if they're just bathing in the water. Sagt the Gemara, Omar Rabbi Loza. Rabbi Loza said another halacha. This is again regarding this kavanah for the tefillah in a mikveh. Toval va'allah. Person taveled in the mikveh and he already came out of the mikveh. And when he taveled, so he did not have kavanah. Machzik atzmoi l'chol ma sheyirtzeh. He could now have kavanah. He could define what his tefillah is for whatever he wants. Right, so he's already out of the mikveh, but even at this point, he can have the kavanah for what his tefillah of the mikveh should be for. So the Gemara asks on this, Meisvei, it says in the Braise, Oideyu rag lo yachas b'mayim, if you're still with one foot in the water, then I say as follows, Huchsak l'dover kal, if your kavanah, you define your tefillah with your kavanah for something that's on a lower level, for a lighter thing, machzik atzma l'dover chomer, you could change your kavanah, and you can think that the mikveh, the tefillah, should be beneficial for something that's more stringent. But that's only as long as one foot is in the water. Allah, when a person completely came out of the water, shuvena machzik. So now he can't have kavanah, he can't define his tefillah to be for something different than what his kavanah was before. My love, don't you think that this is a question of what Rabbi Loza said? Eina machzik klal. That he can't have any, at this point, if you're totally out of the mikveh, you can't have any kavanah at all to define your tefillah. You're already out of the mikveh. So the Gemara answers, Loi, no, that's not the pshat here. This is not a question on Rabbi Loza. Why? Because Eideyu, when it said in the Braise, that it only if he has 1 foot in the water, so then he can change the kavanah of his tefillah. What that means is, Afal pisha hochsak. Even though he clearly had a certain kavanah when he was in the mikveh, he already defined what his tefillah is for a certain kavanah. Machzik. He can still change his mind when he gets out of the mikveh as long as 1 foot is in the water. Allah, if he came totally out of the mikveh, so then im loy hochsak, then what Rabbi Loza said before will be true. If he had no kavanah whatsoever when he was in the mikveh, machzik, he can still define what his tefillah will be for. But ve'im hochsak, if he already decided, if he already had kavanah what the tefillah should be for, then ain't a machzik. Then he can't change his mind. So the point the Gemara is saying is it depends. If you had no kavanah at all, so then once you're out of the mikveh, you can't have kavanah what your tefillah is for. But again, if you did not have kavanah at all, you could have kavanah when you come out of the mikveh. But if you had kavanah, you already defined what your tefillah is, then you can only change your mind if you only have a foot in the mikveh still. But if you don't have a foot in the mikveh anymore, you can't change what you already defined the tefillah for.
If you had no kavanah,
then you could. Then Rabbi Loza said, even if both feet are out of the mikveh, you still could change your. You could define what the tefillah is for. So the Gemara, man tanes. Now who's the tanem?
Before you can have kavanah after.
Correct. That's what he's saying. Man tanes. So who's the tana that says this halacha? That that if you have 1 foot in the water, so you're still connected to the mikveh, and you could undo the kavanah that your tefillah was for. Amar Pedas, Rabbi Yehuda, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that says that when your foot is still connected to the mikveh, so it's as if you're still in the mikveh to some extent. So we learned in the Mishnah as follows: Mikveh shenimdad v'yeshboi arbaim sa. What happens if you have a mikveh that was measured and it's exactly the minimum size of what a mikveh is, 40 sa, mechuvanes, precisely. And v'yardu shnayim v'tavlu zeh chazeh. Two people went down into mikveh and they're toveling one after the other. Harishain tar. So the first person that toveled in the mikveh will be tar. He toveled in the mikveh 40 sa. V'asheni tami. The second person that toveled in the mikveh, you don't have 40 sa anymore. You took some water out with him, so the second person will be tami. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. So on this Rabbi Yehuda comes and says, Im hayu raglov shel rishain noigais b'mayim. If the feet of the first person that came out of the mikveh are still touching the water, so af hasheni tahir. So then the second person that's inside the mikveh will still be tahir, because the water that's on the body of the person that's out of the mikveh, since his feet are still in the mikveh, he's still connected to the mikveh. As we'll see in a moment, the Gemara is going to call this good achis. Good achis means the water that's on the body of the person that's above, outside the mikveh, it's as if it's drawn down. Good achis means we draw it down as if that water on his body is still connected to the mikveh below, and the person inside the mikveh still has a mikveh of 40 sa. So just like Rabbi Yehuda says that over here, b'negeh to these two people toveling in the mikveh, similar we say b'negeh to kavana, that when you come out of the mikveh, you had one kavana when you were inside, and you want to change your kavana when you're coming out. If your feet are still in the water, you have the ability to undo what you already defined your tefillah for, because you're still connected. It's as if the water that's on your body is still connected to the mikveh inside. Rav Nachman, so Rav Nachman said in the name of Rabbi Baravu regarding this machlokes that they had of the two people toveling in a mikveh that it was exactly 40 sa. Machlokes b'mailas derabanan. This whole machlokes here is only regarding a certain tevilah which was required as a chumre midrabanan. But minat Torah they would not argue about this. Aval mitumah letara. If this was a tevilah of a real tumah minat Torah, then divrei akail, everybody would agree that hasheni tami, that the second person is tami. In other words, this is a kula midrabanan. The fact that really the mikveh itself does not have 40 sa anymore, but the body of the person that's coming out, we connect the water of his body to the mikveh. That's only in a case where it's a tevilah midrabanan. By tevilah minat Torah, we wouldn't say such a kula. So now the Gemara says, V'hainu the Rabbi Pedos. This is exactly the point that Rabbi Pedos was saying before. What was the comparison of Rabbi Pedos? Rabbi Pedos was saying, just like here, they're arguing regarding the water on the person's body, whether it's still considered to be connected to the mikveh. So the argument over here is regarding a mikveh that's exactly 40 sa. And he said that from here we could learn also regarding what we were speaking about before, which is the kavana. To change your kavana that you had when you were inside the mikveh, as long as your feet are still in the mikveh. So it's still considered to be connected. Both of these halachas are midrabanan de gechumris. The entire concept of having kavana, and therefore your tevilah is defined according to your kavana, is rabbanan de gechumra. And here, Rabbi Baravu said that this praise, this argument is also b'negeh to a chumre midrabanan. So therefore, Rabbi Pedas connected these two machlokes. But now Ikadamri, there's another opinion that said Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabbi Baravu, that Rav Nachman said in the name of Rabbi Baravu, machlokes mitumah letara. The argument over here between the Rabbanon and Rabbi Yehuda in that Mishnah was even regarding a real tumah minat Torah. That Rabbi Yehuda would say that if you feel connected to the mikveh, the second person will be tired, even when he's a really tamei minat Torah, that is. Aval b'mailas the Rabbanon. If it was only a tefillah which was a chumre midrabanan, divrei akail hasheni tar. There would be no argument about this. If it's only a tefillah midrabanan, everybody would agree that as long as the second person's feet are still connected to the mikveh, the first person's feet that is still connected to the mikveh, the second person would be tar. Now it says the Gemara, plige the Rabbi Pedos. So this argues on what Rabbi Pedos said before, because Rabbi Pedos was speaking before about the chumre midrabanan regarding kavana, whether the fact that your feet are still in the mikveh gives you the ability to change your kavana or not. And Rabbi Pedas said that it depends on this machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanon. But according to what we're saying now, it does not depend on this machlokes. That machlokes was only b'negeh to a tefillah minat Torah, b'negeh to a chumre midrabanan, b'negeh to a tefillah midrabanan, or b'negeh to a kavana that you need for your tefillah, which is also only a chumre midrabanan. There, everybody will agree that your feet still being connected to the mikveh is like you're still in the mikveh and you could change your kavana. Amar Ule, so now based on what we learned here, Ule said, Bet boyi minei mirab Yechanan. I asked the question, or the Bach here is good, is boyi minei. He asked the question from Rabbi Yechanan, li Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that was machadish this concept, that when your feet are still in the water, it's as if the water that's on your body is connected to the water below. And therefore the person that's inside the mikveh, the second person inside the mikveh, could become tar through this. So now the question is, what about the reverse? Mahu lahatbil machtem v'tzinayres beroishay. If this person that's getting out of the mikveh and has water on his body, and he could even have some water that's there in the hairs in his head, and you want to take a little pin or other little things, little items, and toivel it in the water that's on the head of the person. Beroishay shaldishain, in the head of this first person that's coming out of the mikveh. So what's the basis of the question here? Good, achis, islay Rabbi Yehuda. Should I say good? The word good means to draw down. Good means to draw, that is, and achis means down. Good, achis, islay Rabbi Yehuda. Do I say that the chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda is that I consider the water on the body to be connected to what's below, to what's inside the mikveh? And therefore the second person that's inside the mikveh, he's still toiveling in a full mikveh of 40 sa, because the water that's above on the person's body that's coming out is as if it's still connected to the water below. Maybe that Rabbi Yehuda does hold of. But good, asik, leslie. But to say the reverse, to draw it upward, asik means to go upward, to say that the water that's below is connected upward to the water that's on the person's head, that I could now toivel little items in water that's there in the person's head, maybe that he doesn't hold of. Or maybe, good asik nami yislay, that he says the connection between the water and the person's body and the mikveh below works both ways. It works when someone is toiveling in the mikveh below, and it also works if you want to toivel something in the water that's on the head of this person above.
So we learned somewhere that less goes to more, not the more goes
The what? The what? Okay, could be, but the Gemara doesn't bring up that svara here. So it's not a concept of bittul beroiv. The Gemara does not bring up that svara, but the Taisus and Ahmed Beis says that the svara here is water naturally flows downward. So it makes more sense to say that if you're connecting the water to the mikveh, you connect it downward, that the mikveh below still has 40 sa in it. But to say that the water flows upward, to connect the water, to say that if you toivel something in the body of the person above, that the water below is connected to above, that's a much bigger chiddush. That maybe we don't say, because water doesn't flow upward. So the Gemara Malay, so Rabbi Yechanan told Ula that asked this question to Nisua. We learned this in the Mishnah. What does it say? Shalosh gemami yais. You have 3 pits, benachal, where there's a stream of water, and there are 3 pits there. Ha'elyaina, ha'tachtaina, v'ha'emtzois. You have the upper one, a lower one, and a middle one. So in other words, you have these 3 pits that are in this valley that's flowing down into a water that's flowing down from a hill into a valley. And there you have these 3 pits that are going to get filled with water. Now, what's the size of these pits? Are they large enough for a mikveh? So ha'elyaina, v'ha'tachtaina, the upper pit and the lower pit, shall esrim sa. They're only half of the size of a mikveh, 20 sa. The middle one, shall abaim sa. That's large enough. That's a kosher size for a mikveh, 40 sa. And there's a stream of rainwater that flows down this hill into the valley that's running from the first, second to the third pit. So what's the halacha? What do I say about the upper pit and the lower pit that don't have enough of a size of a mikveh? Rabbi Yehuda says, Meir ha'yaimer, that Rabbi Meir said, matbul ba'yayna, that you can use even the upper pit as a kosher mikveh. In other words, the chiddush is, not only do I say that because there's a stream that connects the middle pit, which is 40 sa, to the lower pit, which is half, only 20 sa, that is good achis, that I connect the two because the water is flowing downward and you could toivel there. Even in the upper pit that's above, and the water connects between them, but it's flowing down, nevertheless I say that the upper pit is also kosher to toivel in. So here you see that this concept of the water connecting doesn't only go down, but also goes up to connect what's above. So Ula answers him back, but Vatanya, in another brayso we learned, it says, Rabbi Yehuda says, Meir haya oimer, that Meir said, matbel bel yaina, that you could toivel even in the upper pit, not only in the lower one. But vani oimer, but then Rabbi Yehuda said, I say though, b'tachtaina v'loi bel yaina, that you could only toivel in the lower pit and not in the upper pit. The water flows downward. and therefore the water that's below is considered to be connected to the middle pit, which is a kosher mikveh, but not the pit above. The pit above is only 20 saw, and that connection does not go to the upper pit because water doesn't flow upward. So therefore we see that Rabbi Yehuda himself disagreed with Rab Meir. Amalei, so Rav Yechanan said to Ula, Itane Tanya. Yeah, if you found a brayso that clearly says that it's only Rab Meir that says this, but Rabbi Yehuda himself disagrees, so then, so Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. So Rabbi Yehuda will hold regarding the question that Ula asked, that you can't toivel in the water that's on the body of a person when his feet are still in the mikveh. I don't consider the water below to be connected to the water that's on his body above, just like he says over here regarding the pit that's above the middle pit, that the water does not flow upward. Okay, going back to the Mishnah. What did it say? Atoivel l'chulin, l'hochsak l'chulin. So a person that toivels for chulin, so then the kavanah he had for chulin works for chulin, but not for meiser. So the point that we saw in the Mishnah is that the Mishnah is making a distinction between chulin and meiser. They're not on the same level. Says the Gemara, Mani Masnisen, who is the Tana of our Mishnah? Rabbanon he. This goes according to the opinion of Rabbanon. The Shani Lohu ben chulin lemeiser, that make a distinction between chulin and meiser. This goes back to the Gemara that we learned yesterday in Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis. There it was talking about a sheni l'tumah, and the opinion of the Tanakama, the opinion of Rab Meir was that when it comes to a sheni l'tumah, there's no difference between chulin and meiser. And then the Rabbanon said that, there is. That for chulin, there's no issue with a sheni l'tumah, but for meiser there is. So just like we learned over there, that there's a distinction between chulin and meiser regarding tumah, regarding a sheni l'tumah, so the Gemara says, that it says in our Mishnah regarding the kavanah, that a kavanah for chulin does not work for meiser, will only go according to the Rabbanon's opinion, and not according to Rab Meir. Hey, Meseife, what does it say in the next part of the Mishnah? Big day Amaretz. You have the garments of an Amaretz that's not careful with Tumah. Medris leprushin. This is going to be a Tomei for people that are careful to eat their chulin only betare. Then it says, Big day Prushin, the people that are careful to eat their chulin betare, Medris lo'echle truma. That those garments are going to consider to be Tomei for people that are eating, for the Kayanim that are eating truma. So over here, it skips a step. It goes straight from chulin to truma. It doesn't speak about the fact that meiser, that there's a step in between, that those that are keeping their garments tar for chulin will still be tomei for meiser, and those that are tar for meiser will be tomei for truma. It skips that step. Also, Rab Meir. This goes according to Rab Meir, the Omar chulin o meiser kadodininu, that the level of tumah regarding chulin and meiser is the same. So Reishe Rabbanon. The Seife, Rab Meir, the Reishe, when it talks about the Kavanah and it makes a distinction between Chulin and Meiser, follows Rabbanah that make that distinction. And the Seife that skips Meiser, and it seems like it's the same as Chulin, that goes according to Rab Meir. So the Gemara says two things. No, first the Gemara says, you're right, Reishe Rabbanah, the Seife Rab Meir. That's the only way to explain our Mishnah. The Reishe is going to be according to the Rabbanah, and the Seife will be Rab Meir. Rav Acha Barada changes the Gersa in the Mishnah. Masni law b'Seife. He learns in the Seif of the Mishnah, Chomesh Mailas. He adds that there are 5 levels, even though in our Mishnah it only says 4. But he adds the other thing that was missing here, which is the difference between Chulin and Meiser. Umaiki la kula kerabanan. And he says the entire Mishnah goes according to the Rabbanan that do make a distinction between Chulin and Meiser.